Thanks for joining us. I'm Lance Vieser. Well, the matchup is set for the Wisconsin Supreme Court race on April 4th. The voters picked Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasiewicz, a liberal candidate, and former Justice Daniel Kelly, a conservative candidate. Each candidate is already taking aim at their upcoming opponent. The issues of abortion and of redistricting maps have already come front and center in this race.
I'll be running against someone who doesn't think women get to make their own reproductive rights. I will guarantee you that my opponent, if elected, will uphold the 1849 near total abortion ban.
Tonight we join battle in the fight to preserve our constitutional form of government against a novel and grave threat. Janet Protasiewicz has promised to set aside our law and our Constitution whenever they conflict with her personal values, cannot be allowed to stand.
April's election will determine who controls the court. Conservatives hold a 4-3 majority right now, but conservative Justice Pat Roggensack is retiring. Joining us now is Supreme Court candidate Judge Janet Protasiewicz. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You had the highest vote count in the primary. What is it about your message that you think really resonated?
Well, I think it's a number of things, but I really think people are ready for change. They're ready for common sense. They're really tired of extreme partisanship. I think that's a big part of it. But I also think that the issues that are likely to come before the Wisconsin Supreme Court in the next number of years is also really, really driving the voter turnout. And it's really interesting because I've been traveling across the state and going to places where I would expect a handful of people to show up to talk about the race, and we're getting packed rooms wherever we go. We had to turn people away at an event in Milwaukee last week that, was oversubscribed, and we were very, very surprised. I mean, you don't get that in a primary, in a spring election in Wisconsin when it's cold and snowy. I was in Black River Falls to a great crowd. We were in Eau Claire last week, and we had probably double to triple the turnout that we anticipated in Eau Claire. And I think it's all because people across the entire state are concerned about the issues, but they're also really concerned about the extremism and partisanship on the court, and they want to get back to normal.
You raised the most money in the primary period. How much of that money came from outside the state?
I don't know how much came from outside the state, but I can tell you that we have worked very, very hard to raise that money. And that money really allows us to get our message out to the people of the state of Wisconsin, about the importance of the race, about the issues, about why we have the ability to change the, makeup and the balance of this court to a 4-3 majority that's actually going to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. So all the money that I've received is money that we have, personally fundraised, and we worked very, very, very hard to bring that money in.
With the general election starting, though, we're expecting some big outside groups to make donations both ways. Should outsiders have an influence on a statewide race like this?
Well, I think it's the world that we live in, quite frankly. Ever since the Citizens United case, was decided by the United States Supreme Court, outside money can come into these races. I can tell you that I had probably the only circuit court race in the city of Milwaukee or Milwaukee County where outside money came in. Not for me, but for my opponent when I ran against Rebecca Bradley, who is currently on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. That is very, very challenging for a candidate. Extremely challenging when that happens. It's a little easier when the playing field appears to be leveled and both sides are getting that outside money. But, it's the world that we operate in.
Your opponent has criticized you, saying you're telling voters how you're going to vote on certain issues such as abortion rights and redistricting. Are you telling the voters how you will vote with your ads, which very clearly state your personal beliefs on these issues?
No, and I have been extraordinarily careful to make sure that everybody understands the difference between my personal values and the fact that I plan to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. Extremely careful. My opponent, on the other hand, tells you that he's going to be fair and impartial. Nonetheless, has, the endorsement of Wisconsin right to life. Wisconsin right to life, opposes a person's right to choose, even in cases of rape and incest. I don't for a second believe, not a second, that he went to that endorsement interview and said, oh yeah, I'm going to follow the law. That's what he says in a public venue, in a public forum. I don't believe for a second that that's what he's saying when he's going to endorsement interviews.
So would you vote against those personal beliefs if the law doesn't match up with them?
Of course, absolutely, 100%.
All right, you've labeled your opponent, Dan Kelly, as an extremist for what you believe are his partisan beliefs. Yet you've been very vocal about your own beliefs on some of these same partisan issues, such as abortion. So how is that different?
I think it's very different. In regard to abortion, I've made it very clear what my personal value is. I can also tell you that the bulk of the people in the state of Wisconsin support a woman's right to choose. Thus, I don't believe it's extreme. I can also tell you that the bulk of the people in this state that I'm talking to don't think our maps are fair. And quite frankly, I don't think you can sell to any rational person that the maps in the state of Wisconsin fairly represent the people of the state of Wisconsin. So I don't find those to be extreme at all. I'd also indicate that public safety has been one of the, if not the most important cornerstone of my entire career. Public safety is an issue that spans from the far left to the far right and everybody in between. So I don't find my issues to be extreme at all.
If you do win this race, how do you expect things to change on the Supreme Court?
Well, if I win this race, we have 4 Supreme Court justices who are going to follow the law and uphold the Constitution, not be beholden to special interests, not be extreme, and actually make decisions where people can come into that Supreme Court chamber and feel as though there's not a thumb on the scale against them, that they can come into that Supreme Court chamber no matter who they are and have a fair shake.
Justice Kelly has served on the Supreme Court before. How has your experience so made you qualified for this role?
I know he's served on the Supreme Court before. He was appointed to the Supreme Court, and the voters of the state of Wisconsin resoundingly removed him from his seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. My experience is very different. I spent 25 years in the district attorney's office in Milwaukee, protecting the community, upholding victims' rights, and doing my best to also uphold people's constitutional rights and keep our community safe. I've been a judge. He's never been a judge. I have sentenced people in very, very challenging situations and tough cases. I just finished a 3-year, and I call it a tour of duty in Milwaukee, handling homicide cases, sexual assault cases, and child pornography cases. That was the entire docket for 3 years. That's all I did, handling those serious cases. Before that, handling extraordinarily serious drug dealing and drug trafficking cases. So he has absolutely no experience as a circuit court judge. He's never done that type of work. He's never sentenced anyone. He's never ruled on a motion. He's never had to weigh the factors that a judge has to weigh when they sentence a person.
Both sides have been critical of each other in certain cases throughout your history. In your case, there have been a couple of cases that have been pointed out where they're saying you went easy on some criminals. What's your response to that?
My response is that I have sentenced thousands of people in my career, thousands. And I have to make some really tough decisions. Is somebody going to prison for a lengthy period of time? Is somebody being placed on probation? Is somebody, getting a second chance? And you weigh the factors and you make decisions. Like I said, I have worked my entire career to keep my community safe and believe very, very strongly in public safety. You can't send every single person who comes in front of you to prison, or you're not weighing all the factors. You can't do that. You suppose you could do it to play it safe if you determined that you were going to run for the Supreme Court at some point, but you absolutely can't do that. You weigh the factors as they're presented to you. And so I just think it's really, it's a hypercritical Republican stunt, quite frankly. I'm well aware that the Republican Party of the state of Wisconsin did an open records request to look at every single case that I have handled or touched since I became a judge in 2014. And so they found a couple that they cherry picked where, maybe they would have thought that the public would have thought somebody could do something differently. I'd say my entire career has been based on keeping people safe.
I want to thank you so much for the time here this week. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much.